Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from. Thank you for joining. We're pleased to have you with us here. Today, Dan, who is an amazing partner and is the CEO and founder of Automation Helpers, which is a no-code automation agency. They help clients automate business processes and implement the proper software into their business. Dan is an amazing SmartSuite partner and has worked with countless SmartSuite clients to implement SmartSuite and many other products that go along with it. Dan is also runs a very successful YouTube channel and puts out phenomenal content that I personally enjoy watching every time it comes out about a variety of different products, including SmartSuite. And we're just very pleased to always work with Dan from the very early days. And so today, I think Dan has a phenomenal webinar planned for us about the topic of automating your service delivery. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Dan, and can't wait to learn myself what you have to share.
Yeah, thanks, Avi. Thanks, everybody, for being here. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about. I assume many of you who are on the call have service businesses of your own, or you work in businesses that have services as part of it. And even prior to my work in Automation Helpers, I started off my career in the Microsoft partner space, moved on from there, most recently led a professional services team at Zoom. So this is something that I've seen pretty much all shapes and sizes of service delivery. Of course, I've been more on the tech side, but when we implement this for clients, we see a whole gamut of the experience here. So this is something that we're going to talk about, kind of the implications with SmartSuite and how we do automating service delivery, but it's something that we can draw experiences from collective service delivery space. And so one of the first questions, just as we get into this, is why would we spend time automating service delivery? Now, of course, the consultants in the room would say, hey, automate everything that you can, but how do you determine what's worth spending that investment of time? And the way I think about it, because we could say, hey, let's just focus on the sales side of the house. Sales and marketing always get automation behind it, but why spend the time here? And a few reasons that I just put together. So one is that I think it can really help improve your consistency and quality of delivery. I just think back to our experience at Automation Helpers as we went from me being a solo consultant to now we've got a team of 10, 11, 12 of us that are working on it. How do you go from that 0 to 1 phase and then be able to scale so that you can grow a team behind it who's ensuring a similar consistency of quality? Another thing is around revenue forecasting. So often we think about revenue from the side of sales. And at the point that we get signatures, we're like, great, this is locked in. But there are so many revenue opportunities that we can find just on the service delivery side that being able to see that kind of end to end is really important. And then when it comes to growth and capacity planning, making sure that you have the right number of resources allocated, that you see a trajectory for growth, that you've got the right reporting and analytics behind the system to understand how you need to manage that capacity. And then really overall, I think this is the biggest reason that we use SmartSuite for our service delivery is the end-to-end visibility of lead to cash. Now, what do I mean by that? Some of you are process wonks and you know exactly what I'm talking about, but this is saying, hey, from the very second a lead comes in the door, all the way through, you deliver the services and then you invoice them and you get money collected. That's the whole lead to cash process. How are we getting visibility into that? Because I'll be honest, I've worked at some of the biggest tech companies and they don't even have great visibility into this process. Oftentimes it's, hey, we manage our sales inside of Salesforce and we do our project delivery in a totally different system and they just operate in their separate worlds. And so when we chose to adopt SmartSuite ourselves, and as we've been helping clients implement SmartSuite, it's how do we look at this as a holistic picture? It's not necessarily the same folks that are on the sales team or on the delivery team. You might be a large or a mid-sized organization that's got totally distinct needs. But being able to trace that story through, I think, is really helpful. And that's going to be a key theme as we go about our discussion here today. So I'm going to come at this a little bit from the business owner management side of things today. Certainly, it's a great topic to focus on how do we implement project management tools and how do we as an individual contributor have a good experience in the platform and how do we make that a good experience for our clients. But the main focus today is really how we focus on automating it so that it's a key part of our business. We might be a service-based business or it's a core chunk of our revenue, and how do we automate that piece of it? I'm going to start off inside of SmartSuite. And some of you might have been on the webinar that we did in June. And the last time that we came with the SmartSuite team, we were focused on how to automate our CRM. I think we call it the fully automated CRM. If you haven't had a chance to watch, that might be of interest. And Avi, maybe we can find that link on the YouTube channel of what we did before, because I think that'll serve as a good kickoff point to this. We're picking up where we left off. We went through the sales cycle and how can we automate our leads. Right now, what we're talking about is how do we go from the contracting phase in through our service delivery? Why I think the contracting sometimes involves both parties is you've got scoping. Sometimes that falls on the service side. Sometimes it falls on the sales side. You've got the contractual pieces. Maybe you're putting an SOW together for this. And so we want to make sure that we have that joint visibility. And oftentimes I've seen many organizations where that process from going from sales to delivery is where stuff really gets dropped. You have all these amazing conversations and discoveries and everything that happens on the sales side. And then I've been a part of teams that either have no visibility and the service team has to start from scratch and they have to begin a scoping process that's entirely different. And as a client, you think, what's going on here, guys? We've already spent all this time together and you sound like you have no idea what's going on in my business. That's one problem I see. Or it swings to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is you have your service delivery folks on all these calls with sales team, and it's very expensive for you, right? So you have discovery calls where you bring in PS and they're doing this as part of the process, and you're not really getting a good, efficient use of your time. So I want to talk about what we do. And let me just open up one of these records here of our contacts. For us, what we do is we automate all interactions that we have with our leads and our clients. And we automate that and we pump it all into SmartSuite so that we have shared visibility about what's happening with that prospect or that client. So two of the big pieces that we're doing on our side are, if you haven't heard of this, there's a tool called Fireflies. There's a lot of these tools that are out there, but what this allows you to do is it connects to your Zoom or your Google Meets, and this is able to transcribe and use AI to get an AI-based transcription and follow-up items of tasks that you need to do from this. The reason we implemented Fireflies, and we've implemented it for a handful of clients as well, is because you can then take that data and instead of saying, hey, go out to this other tool and find all the information there and pull it back, we're writing that data into SmartSuite. So then again, when anybody can see that contact, they can see those calls that we've already had. This is something that the SmartSuite team themselves are doing. Peter implemented it at least on the tech side to be able to have these calls internally. Avi, I think you guys use that too throughout the organization. So just to give you an idea here, if I pop open one of these Firefly notes, I'm able to see all of our meeting notes that came from it, any action items that we have. We did some work on the integration so that it would automatically assign and say which contacts are a part of this, not just their email address, but it actually links them to the contacts that we have in the system. Then we've got files for the transcription, or we can go ahead and open up the full call if we want to. But this really gives us that picture of what's going on. So now imagine that your service team can spend, honestly, 5 to 15 minutes reviewing the information rather than sitting on 3 one-hour calls, or they're just not a part of the process at all. And so I think that provides a lot of consistency there. Another thing that we do is that we're syncing all of our email activity. So I have this on my email, and of course we can set up some rules around it and things like that. And we have it on our consultants as well, so that as we have these conversations with our clients, this is something that everybody gets visibility into. And as we're doing that, one of the things that we've done is we started doing this time and time with Make and Zapier. We had the same request, sync my emails, get all that information going. One of the things that we're building right now is a tool called Syncable. It's at syncable.io. We're in a closed beta right now, but those of you who are interested, essentially what we're doing is we're automatically syncing the emails. So you just hook it up to Gmail that you're working on, and we sync that information. But what we're also doing is we're creating this add-on. And so you can see on the right-hand side, if you want to see your information from SmartSuite inside of your email, this is hugely valuable to sales teams and delivery teams as well, because now you get that full picture of the customer and you don't always have to be in SmartSuite. You can be in email, you can be in SmartSuite, and you get that joint information, whichever platform that you're on. The other thing that I'll mention here too is we've been doing a lot with RingCentral. We have a number of clients who have phone call activity coming in. So some want outbound phone calls and things like that. Some want to say, hey, I've got RingCentral, the app on my phone. Whenever we call out, I want that to save that call record history. So we've got a number of different tools, of course, that businesses use to be able to log their communication. But I think the big takeaway here is in syncing this back and not even having it be manual, because the old way of doing things with CRM was always to say, hey, let's go ahead and log a call, and you'd have to click and you'd enter all the information. And why bother to do that anymore when we've got these tools at our fingertips to automate that process? And then I'm also able to say, hey, how long was it since we followed up with someone? Because we can see that entire interaction history collectively here. So that's how we help smooth that process on the handoff side of things. But let's talk about the contract generation itself. As an organization, we use a tool called PandaDoc to generate our contracts. Now, many of you might use the document designer that's inside of SmartSuite, and you can use that to take data in SmartSuite and put it in document form, which is really nice. We used to use DocuSign ourselves, but we found that the APIs are limiting. And I don't know, the way that they price envelopes to me is nuts when you've got other tools that do it much more efficiently and inexpensively. So we migrated over to PandaDocs. And I just want to show you here, let's say that we're at the point in the sales process and we're going to create that contract. And what we've done, this is just demo data, but let's throw in an hourly rate here. And if we click a button to create that contract, what we're going to do is it's going to send all of this information that we have about our lead, all the conversations that we had, anything that needs to go into that document. So I'm going to go ahead and click this button. You'll notice it's going to open up a new tab. Right now it's processing. This is called a webhook in Make. If you're not familiar with Make, is an integration platform that connects to SmartSuite to be able to send this information out. And what I've done, for those of you who are on the more technical side, it's cool. There's a webhook response, which can open up this document so we can see the document that we just generated here with a click of that button. So that information all gets dynamically inserted. It took this information, the account, the person's name, their email address. We're able to insert that, any custom fields that our clients have, we can insert that into the documents that we have. And now I'm going to actually go through the process, which is going to take just a second here, but I do want to show you what this looks like if we go through the signatures side of it. But before we do that, I just want to show you inside of SmartSuite, this actually triggered to say contract sent. So we had the status update inside the system. For those of you who are on sales or delivery teams, you're probably constantly manually updating statuses of things. And what we try to do is we try to automate those statuses automatically. So it's not about, hey, Dan, did you update the CRM? The CRM's updating itself. Where are we currently at with that process? And so from here, it's generated a PandaDoc document ID. We can open that up and view it again if we need access to that information. We've sent out, or we've stamped a date of when that's actually been sent. So let's open this up now. Let me pull open my email here. And this is a process very similar to DocuSign and others where you get an email. I'm the initial signer. This is me, Dan, at Automation Helpers. I'm signing on behalf of our organization. I check it through. I'm just going to go ahead and apply my signature here and finish that document. This is now going to get sent on to the client at this point. So let me X out of here and I'll pull in my personal email here. We sent it off to the client now. And I'm going to pull this in and open up the document. And I'm going to fill in some information really quick here because we don't initially capture information about the address and phone and things of our clients. The reason we don't do that is because we find that the conversion on our websites works better when we just ask for minimal information. So now at this point, we need the customer's information as we're actually contracting with them. They can go ahead and sign the document. And let me show you what happens here, because this is really unique from, I think, any of the implementations that I've seen out there. Let me scroll over and let's see if this will happen here in real time or near real time for us. But essentially what's happening is as we've signed off on that document, that is going to send off an email. Sorry, I'm just organizing my windows. There we go. It triggers in that near real time here to say that contract's been signed. Here's the reason why this is so unique. PandaDocs has these webhooks, and a webhook is like, hey, when you sign the contract, we'll fire something off and we can automate this on your behalf. That's only on their enterprise plan. It's pretty expensive. And so you'll see a lot of folks who have created the first part of this integration, which was to say, go ahead and dynamically send that information in a contract. What it doesn't do is update to say, this has been signed. Because imagine all the automation you can do. Not only did we get it to update the status, but remember all those custom fields we just filled out with the address information? That's now updated those custom fields back here inside of the system. Now, this is great from a visibility standpoint, but even more importantly, what happens after contracting? At some point, you need to set up your customer master information. We invoice through QuickBooks. So what was the process before we set up this automation? Okay, we don't know exactly when they signed. We got an email notification, but that doesn't email or everybody, it doesn't notify everybody, our whole service delivery team. So we don't know when that's happened. So now it's up to our services team, go find their information, see, oh, is that available? Oh, it's not available yet. Okay, now it's available. Now we're going to go ahead and create that record inside of QuickBooks for that customer information. That's a huge waste of time, right? We don't want to spend all that time having to do that manual work. So what we do is, as soon as this gets signed and it has an address, we can use that to automatically create the customer record inside of QuickBooks. That's a big time savings for us. The other thing that we're doing is by date and time stamping this information, we're able to track all of these stages through the life cycle, and we use this in velocity reporting. Because if you're a small business owner, there's nothing more important than getting deals done quickly, both in terms of getting to signature and then getting kickoff and being able to do that service delivery. So for us, we have entire dashboards that are all about velocity, where we can say, how long did they spend in this stage? And we're using that from these automations that we're kicking back. In this case, we're using it for creating those contracts. So I know I spent a chunk of time here, but I hope you see that value in being able to update that information back in the system so that we've got this holistic approach without having to do all this manual data entry and using that to be able to inform our team holistically. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the next steps here. So one of the things that we do is we've got an automation. This is using SmartSuite's automations just out of the box here, where we're going to create a customer after we get to that signed contract stage. And then we're going to go ahead and create a record in our customers app, which is in our project management solution. So what that did, let me hop on over into our projects. And those of you who've been using a SmartSuite for a long time, you're well aware of this. But those of you who are new to SmartSuite, one of the great features that we love is that even though we have these different solutions here, we've got one for our project management team and one for our sales team with the CRM, that this information links across to one another. You can have automations from the sales side that feed into the project side. You don't have these restrictions where your data is really segmented and you can't attach that between things. So we're able to link our customer record back to that contact or lead record, which is really helpful. So we've had this automatically generate a record, our customer record based on this, and then we go ahead and create projects for that customers and tasks and things like that. I want to hop into the task creation side of it. So this is what typically our consultants are doing, right? So the customer is set up, the project is set up. Now they've got a handful of tasks that they create. And we're focused here a little bit less on the time entry side and the experience of writing the information and interacting with the customer. This still gets back to how do we do our financial reporting? Because this is huge. I've worked with so many service organizations where they've had to adopt a really basic system for their revenue because they're not able to track it completely, or they're just making some broad stroke assumptions about this. And what we do is we get really granular here. So if we're assuming that this project is done on an hourly basis, let me show you some information here. So we've got our consultant who's entering the billable duration. But what we've done here is when we assign this out to someone, so this task is assigned to me in this case, this is me, a user of SmartSuite, right? So I have my own security permissions to be able to access this record. But one of the things that we can't do just out of the box in the system is that we don't have custom fields with this user. So if Dan is billing at a certain rate, we can't say, oh, what's Dan's bill rate on his user record? So one of the things that we do is we have an automation that says, whenever we assign this task, then we're going to look to this other consultants table and pull in that consultant's rate so that we can perform our financial calculations. So what this automation does is says, oh, if it's Dan Leeman, great. Now we're going to link this to the assigned consultant record of Dan Leeman. And then all of this other information on the financial side, is purely automated. The only thing they're doing is entering the time entry. So we've got a bill rate. How do we know what the bill rate is? We're not manually entering this. This is pulling all the way back from the CRM side to say, what's on their contract, right? Because we've got the contract updating their bill rate inside of the system. So this is a formula that looks up that information for the bill rate. We've got our consultant rate. Again, that's tied to the assigned consultant that we have. So that's acting as a lookup and pulling that information back. And then we're calculating what's our margin. If we charge the client $50 and the consultant's $25, by the way, these are all made up numbers here. I'd love to offer services at that rate, but we're not quite that low. But we're able to calculate the hourly margin off of that. And then what we're doing is we're multiplying across and saying, what's the total amount? And you can see that this shifts, right? If we take this 8 hours and we say, oh, I spent 2 more hours on it, so it's up to 10 hours. And now that all that information updates our total amount, the margin updates, our percentage updates, if that changes throughout the task. And you can imagine now we've got that really granular data, which is helpful to roll up to be able to say, hey, how are we doing on a project level? What's our margins on a project? What's our margins for this customer overall? We can do reports to say, hey, for a client that's in this industry, what margins do we have? This is the kind of financial reporting that businesses need and that oftentimes gets forgotten about because we don't have it set up that way to be able to track everything. So I'm saying this is just to give you that kind of underlayer of how do we get that data there? And then I want to talk about how we can use that on the reporting side of the house. Let me hop back into my slide deck here. Now, I'd love to be able to show you a dashboard. It took us, a decent chunk of time to set up these dashboards exactly the way we wanted to, and it's a little hard to anonymize all the data. So I'm not going to be able to show you the dashboards, but just if you can get a visualization in your mind of we're tracking margin on everything. We're tracking our week-to-week invoicing. We're tracking the margins. We're tracking forecasting and projections off of all that information. So this is using, on the left-hand side is just a widget being able to view information over time about that. And we can do that really nicely on SmartSuite dashboards. What I've found for the clients that we worked with is that SmartSuite dashboards probably work perfectly for their needs 75% of the time, which is awesome because there's great capabilities where lots of different types of charts, we can pull in different widgets and different views into a dashboard. So we get all of that accessibility. But there are times, and our business is one where we are so data driven that there are certain things that we can't do within the out-of-the-box reporting functionality. And that isn't a fault of SmartSuite or anything like that. That's just par for the course with no-code tools, because what ends up happening is that you've got entire tools like Looker or Microsoft's Power BI that are devoted just to data visualization. So what we've found is in order to augment this for businesses like ours, we're sending the SmartSuite data that we have, we're funneling it into an integration tool like Make or Pipedream. And I'm going to talk about why we use Pipedream in a moment here. And then what we're doing is we're sending it to either Google Sheets or Google BigQuery. Depends on the technical level of your organization, but both of those we're using to host that raw data. And then we're using Looker on top or Microsoft Power BI to be able to have that data visualization layer to it. Now, do you need to have kind of this middle step of sending it to Google Sheets or BigQuery? You don't. One of the things that we'd like to be able to do is eventually at some point create a connector for SmartSuite and Looker so that we could pull in that data in real time, which I think would be really powerful. But just for now, it's been pretty easy for us to be able to pump that data out. So the thing I want to talk about is why Pipedream? Because if you're on this call, almost all of you have probably heard of Zapier as a tool to be able to integrate. A lot of you use Make, which used to be called Integromat. Why are we using this tool called Pipedream? The reason is why I just want to talk about this a little bit is that sometimes for the sake of no code, we get so stuck on we do everything through the no code way of doing things. But let's talk about if we used a tool like Make charges for each little module or bubble that they have within a scenario. And so if, let's say in our business, we have thousands of tasks, we have hundreds of clients, and we have hundreds to thousands of invoices coming up, that's a lot of data to be able to process. In Make's world, if we were going to update this into a spreadsheet, you would say, hey, make a call, make an API call, or essentially pull this data from SmartSuite. That's no problem. That comes over easy. That's not operationally expensive. But then what we have to do is we got to get that into a spreadsheet. And unfortunately, what I've seen a lot of folks do is they use the iteration and the aggregator, and they say, okay, for each bundle, each row is a bundle. We're going to write that into a spreadsheet. I know I'm getting a little bit technical here, but what I've seen is for some companies, generating one report honestly would cost them hundreds of dollars a month to generate one report. And then that's not even keeping your data super up to date. So we use a tool called PipeDream, which I think is the best of both worlds in terms of being able to take data and then write a little bit of code behind it. So what we're doing is we can take the information, we can segment it, we can manipulate it how we want, put it in that spreadsheet, and this costs a fraction of a cent to run once. So we can run this whenever we want. And so don't get stuck in that mindset of saying, and by the way, we love Make and Zapier. We use both of them all the time for our clients. But don't get stuck in that mindset of saying, oh, shoot, this is going to be super expensive for me because I have to iterate on this thousands of times, which costs me a lot of money. Instead, there's other opportunities out there to be able to write this data in a really meaningful way. And this was like a half hour of dev work. We're not talking about this crazy thing to be able to build out. So I just want to mention that for those of you who are saying like, hey, dashboards are great, but we are a service-based business and we are so operationally intense on our data that there are other systems out there. And so we've built this out for a couple of clients who need just that extra layer of reporting. All right, from here, I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing on the QuickBooks side. I apologize, I can't show this automation live because, again, we're hooked completely up to our production systems right now. And my goal is not to generate a bunch of floofy invoices. But just to give you an idea, I mentioned at the beginning, we get contracts signed, boom, we've got an automation that's then creating the customer master record inside of QuickBooks. That's one thing that we're doing. Then we've got all of our consultants who are tracking these tasks. And as they track those tasks, we have the tasks associated to an invoice. We typically invoice weekly. Some clients we've got monthly. And so we have on this cadence, and then we just click a button, boom, and we click that button or we update that status. And that's going to then create that invoice. It takes all the descriptions over. It can take line items over if we use line items. And by doing that, makes that process about, 10 times faster. I would say we were probably spending 5 hours a weekend. And I feel bad for Ben. Ben leads the service delivery side. For us, spend 5 hours. And it's not something that you typically outsource to the lowest common denominator in the organization. Who is it? It's like the CEO. It's the service delivery leader, expensive resources who are doing that. So if you're saying, hey, suddenly we're spending hundreds to thousands of dollars a week to be able to invoice our clients, that's nuts. And so what we did is, because we have the automated process, we click a button, it creates it. He does a once scan over. We decided not to go with automatically just sending it out because we still want to have that do a once over, like just in case something with the integration or something else happened, we want to be able to look at that information. But honestly, that was one of the best investments of time on our side to be able to say, hey, if something's going to cost you hundreds to thousands of dollars a week, then there's got to be a better way to do it. Thinking of the time value of yourself as the business owner. So that's what we're doing on the QuickBooks side. We've done it on Xero. I think we had a client who's looking at doing Wave. So really the processes for this are very similar. Of course, the APIs are a little bit different just depending on the tool that you're using for that. All right, so that's how we're doing QuickBooks. I think the last thing that I was going to talk about today is just how do we take this information? We've got this huge wealth of data and we've automated it, but how do we get that information out to our clients? And so there's a couple different things I want to talk about. So one is, if I can find my right tab, I'm sure many of you have 50,000 tabs open a day like I do. Okay, so those of you who aren't familiar with my YouTube channel, a few months ago, I created a couple videos on how we could create a client portal within SmartSuite. And this was a pretty popular set of videos because in many other tools, such as like Airtable and others like that, you are pretty much forced to use an external tool with Airtable to be able to surface that information externally to clients. One of the things that I noticed is with the guest access that we have inside of SmartSuite. So if you're not familiar, guest access is a special permission that you can assign to users that they are not paid licensed users of the system. And this is SmartSuite saying, hey guys, this is okay. We designed it this way. It's not like a workaround where obviously like, Dan, don't tell them that, because this works really well for a number of people. which is the idea that those people who have guest access can see information, they can see data inside of views, and they can update statuses of things. So if they're assigned records, they can update that status as well. So this is an example of a client portal where we then had this data exposed to our clients. Notice that in this app, in the solution, I just have a single app. We didn't say, hey, let's go ahead and have them see a grid of tasks and then see a grid of invoices, because that gets confusing. You want it to be as simple as possible for your clients. So we created this. In the videos, we get into the specifics of how we created automations to assign the guest access. So we're not having to say, oh, on every single record, we have to then find the guest user to assign them that. We created some automations here. We also talked about how we could use forms for the creation of records, because guest access doesn't allow for the create or update of records, but using forms, we can create records. You could use something like fill out forms to be able to update records. So I think there's a ton of flexibility that you can do if you have needs for a base level portal. And by base level, I just mean most of the data is read-only. Some of it, you're creating a request or something like that. So if this is something that looks appealing to you, this can be done inside a SmartSuite, essentially natively. Now, for those of you who say, yeah, but I still have needs on top of it, like our clients are asking us for a lot of information, they're creating records, they're updating records. The part that we love is that there are now an onslaught of tools that are coming out. The first one here that we've been talking about is Easy Portal. So Easy Portal, you might have heard about them, but they are going from a closed beta to an open beta now. So anybody can go to their website. I think it's just easyportal.com. Yeah, easyportal.com. You can sign up, and they are very much geared at being like the portal tool for SmartSuite. So they're not like, hey, we've got 5 different data sources. They've been very much focused on building this out for SmartSuite. Just to give you a quick look of something here, you can customize how this looks with your logo and what the menus look like. They already have the permissions working so that you could display different kinds of blocks on the page depending on visibility. You could say, here's what clients can see. If Avi is a client, here's what Avi can see. If Dan is a consultant, here's what Dan can see. So they already have those permissions, which is great. We've got, here's our tasks, and we can create a new task. And whenever we create this information, that data is stored back in SmartSuite. So there's not really 2 separate databases. It's, hey, us as a team, as a project team, we get all the information in SmartSuite, but now we have a way to be able to surface this out to clients. Now, full disclosure, because we work with a number of different tools here, there's still some things that need to get ironed out here. So one that I'm really hoping that I think is going to get fixed or rolled out as a feature in the next couple of weeks is, right now, if we create a task, we can't actually link the task to a project or link that, have the assigned to, and things like that. So we found for clients that works really well for a little bit more basic scenarios right now, a little bit more read-only oriented data. But honestly, I'd expect in the next couple of weeks that they'll be rolling out with some of those features. So we've been in communication with them. They've got a Slack channel. They're really great at responding to that too. So those are some different options, how we can take all of this data, how do we take the tasks, how do we take the invoices, and be able to have one spot that clients can go to be able to access and view all of that information. Okay, so I know I talked very quickly, and I've been a bit of a whirlwind of information, but those are really the high level pieces that I wanted to focus on today, talk through that end-to-end process of how do we get over from the sales team, how do we execute on the service delivery, be able to report on that, and then get information out to our clients. But I love this being a conversation here. So Avi, maybe if we want to open this up to questions, and we'll go from here.
Yeah, absolutely. This was absolutely phenomenal. As expected, I learned tons. And this was really cool to see how you're automating everything end to end. I actually personally have a few questions. Maybe I'll start with those while folks, if anyone has specific questions you want us to bring up live, throw them in the Q&A section. So not the chat section, but the Q&A section so that we can make sure that they're all addressed. But I did see a question come through in the middle. You mentioned you use PandaDoc. Folks were saying that they use Adobe document management. Is that possible to integrate as well?
I think so. So everything always comes down to what their API allows us to do and takes a little bit of digging. So for example, DocuSign is like one of the most popular ones, but their API is kind of garbage for accessibility of the custom fields. It would take just like probably a 5-minute check to be able to say, yep, that works just great out of the box. But essentially, most of that automation we're doing inside of Make. So whenever I'm checking on a tool, I'm typically just coming in to see what are the different endpoints that we have here. Sorry, I'm getting in the weeds, but we got a little bit of time, so why not? Make has like a gazillion different things. So Adobe Acrobat Sign, yeah, I would say that for sure the like creating list workflows, list groups, create an agreement. So that should be no fine creating it. I think it's that back end side of it of getting the information back, which I think you could probably do with the watch event. So I think that should probably work out of the box that way. I don't think I actually finished my story of in PandaDocs closing the loop on that, but because those webhooks are only available on their enterprise plan, and we didn't want to shell out a ton for that, and most of our clients don't either, what we actually did is we set up a mail hook. So there are webhooks for events that happen on the web. We set up a mail hook because PandaDocs sends us an email to say, yay, everybody signed. So what we did is we created a filter inside of Gmail. It's looking and it's saying, hey, if you get an email that's like, yay, everybody signed, use that to trigger, find the most recent agreement, pull the data from it, and send it into SmartSuite. And this is the stuff I love about being a consultant, is like the super creative stuff, because that's nothing you can just do with Make out of the box, because they don't have the webhooks in there. So that was a creative approach we took.
I love that. That's awesome. I always love the workarounds, because there always are workarounds, and sometimes they work great. I'm curious, just personally, I'm curious. First of all, I don't know if you have an estimate of how long did it take you to build this whole system of automating everything within SmartSuite and then connecting it to your PandaDoc and getting your report set up? And just like this, for people to understand, does this take 50 hours, 100 hours, 20 hours, 200 hours? Just what's the hours that it would take to set up? And obviously your experience with these tools, so you know your way around. And then the other side of the question is, how often do you find yourself updating or changing the way you do things?
Yeah, those are all great questions. So for our own business, one of the things that we decided to do early on is we thought, both because we want our business to be automated and we want to simplify tasks, but also we're like, dude, if we don't spend the time to automate our own business, how dumb is that to be a company called Automation Helpers? And you're like, yeah, we're doing everything manually. We don't have time because we're automating stuff for our clients. So one of the things that we do is I don't know, Google used to have, what do they call it? Their 20% time or whatever it was. They like devoted a certain chunk of hours per week where they're like, hey, work on projects that make Google better. And we've taken a similar approach where we're like, every week, if we find any kind of manual stuff, we're going to keep improving. So for us, that's a little bit different than when we work with clients, which are typically like, boom, let's knock this out as quickly as we can and get the low-hanging fruit there. For us, we're going to keep finding anything that can be automated, because that serves as like proofs of concept for our clients and ideas, and gets those creative juices flowing. In general, like, it's always tough to say exactly for an integration, but we typically say it's 10 to 15 hours for an integration. Now, you could technically create an integration in 5 minutes, and some things truthfully are that easy. But usually when it comes to testing, sometimes I see people make too many automations and there's no error handling in it. So then suddenly it like breaks all the time and that kind of stuff. So typically I ballpark it around that kind of thing. Yeah. And then there's ones that take like custom APIs, right? Where they don't actually have one of these nice little modules like we see the Adobe one. Instead, we're using the HTTP requests and we're using custom APIs to be able to do that. So sometimes those take a little bit longer, but almost always what we find is that the ROI far exceeds the implementation costs. Like, we wouldn't even take on a project where there's no ROI on it, because that doesn't make sense for the business owner. But yeah, like we talked about, the implementing the QuickBooks stuff totally made sense. Because we were saving, if you save 5 hours a week and it took us 10, 15 hours to build, totally worth it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I could totally picture that. Cool. And what about so I saw you're using Pipedream, and I get why you're using that. And yeah, me, you kind of open Pipedream and you see all those lines of code, that gets me dizzy because I don't know how to write code. So what would be your suggestion for people who want to take your advice and say, hey, Pipedream might be more cost-effective solution, but I'm just going to get dizzy looking at all those lines of code?
Yeah. I don't know if you're setting me up for a sales pitch here, but typically because we have those skills. Like, honestly, that's, I think, what separates out a lot of different partners is that there are people who are like, dude, I've always been a fan of no code stuff. For us, like, we have engineers and developers on our team. And so I've always looked at no code as using the right tool for the job. I don't think, I'm not dogmatic about no code from the standpoint of, no, if there's a line of code, it is not no code and we won't do that. I think of it like, hey, what's going to be easiest to maintain? What's going to be cost efficient for you as an organization? Sometimes that takes a little bit of code. But if you've got really fast developers that you're working with, it's going to take less time to implement that. If I implemented that in Make, it would take roughly the same amount of time to implement and Make, but the operational costs are going to exceed it. So for me, it's always just like a value proposition. Now, there are some clients who are going to say, hey, because like typically we operate in clients' accounts for these things. They have their Pipedream account or their Make account or whatever. Like, I get it. You want data to be portable so that, hey, if you need to go somewhere else or have someone else work on it or whatever, that you've got that access. And I think that access is important. But I think breaking away from, I'm in the note. Yeah, there's developers who are like, no code's dumb because I can't customize every single thing I want. You've got people who are like, no code is the only way. But I really think the best world is this little hybrid where you take the most efficient approach.
That's fair. I see folks are asking if AI can maybe generate all that Pipedream code.
Oh yeah, and because the Pipedream code that we're using is just JavaScript. It supports Python as well too. So yeah, ChatGPT. Sorry, I can lead with that. Yeah, I think there's always the part of understanding what the AI is doing and asking it the right questions to be able to give what you need. So I found that typically people who are using AI for generating code have a semblance of an idea of what the code is doing to ask the right questions. But yeah, if you find yourself one of those like dabbling, oh yeah, I made a little HTML, CSS, JavaScript thing. Yes, I think AI would be a great way to get to that code.
That's fair. I guess that leads me into like more of a general question, but I'm curious, coming from the world of developer world and having developers on your team, and then, like you said, making advanced utilization of no-code tools. And I think this is a great example of a real advanced no-code system that's automating your entire business end to end. What do you think is like the general value of or place for no-code versus custom code? And I think you touched about that a little bit, but maybe you can expand that. And then I promise we'll get to all the questions that are coming in.
Yeah, honestly, no code for me is all about time to value and the maintenance side of it. So if you can spin up, like most people can go into SmartSuite, find a project management solution template, spin it up, and it's going to be like 70% effective for what you want it to be. And then it's like tweaking things on top of that kind of value. If you're like, hey, developer, create a Vue.js application for me where I can do project management, start that from scratch. That's how people get locked into thousands of hour projects. So the time to value for people is amazing. Getting organizations, we work with so many organizations that are like paper and pencil or spreadsheets, and then no code is 1,000 times more accessible, right? And I think that accessibility is what's helping organizations be able to implement some degree of automation into their business, which is really where they see that ROI. Yeah, did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's what we see as well, is people typically used to think of it into like, if they have a problem in their business, and let's say even a larger business, they think of it from the perspective of, we can either just continue using email and spreadsheets, or we can get a point solution, but that might be very rigid and just like not much room for customization. And obviously every business is unique, or at least likes to think of itself as unique. And then or the third option is always, okay, let's get a developer, but like you're saying, thousands of hours, hundreds of thousands of dollars to build the base level functionality that a no-code application can deliver. And so that's what we see is the speed to value, and just kind of presenting a fourth option is you don't have to stick with your problem. You don't have to get a point solution. You don't have to do custom dev. You can actually get a no-code application that will give you the best of all worlds. And I think this is a great representation of being able to supplement that with custom code, just to add that like cherry on the top, or finish up that extra 10%, 20%, whatever that is for your business, but having the baseline be done on no code, which is, like you said, speed to values. Yeah. Okay, let's get to a few questions. So we have over here a question from Isaac. He says, Dan, how do you handle if an automatic status change gets out of sync? Do you manually set a status backwards? I'm not sure what part he's asking that on.
Yeah, I'll try to take a swing at it. We actually utilize a couple different status fields, and we have lookups to some of those status fields. For example, when we think of like the sales process and the sales status, that's something that is governed by the sales team. And so that visibility and what it triggers inside the system is important to be able to kick off the next step of the process. Like you saw, hey, when we get to contract signed, go ahead and create the customer record in the other solution. So one of the great things, and maybe I can just hop in here, depending on what plan you're on, I believe, but you've got the ability to edit down to those field level permissions for things. So oftentimes we're going to restrict the access pretty heavily. Like our consulting team needs to be able to update the status of a task, for example, to be able to do that. But like that sales status, we just want them to reference it. We want the automation to reference it, but we don't want everybody to have access to it. So that's one thing that helps. But you're right. Sometimes you have to think about the dependencies of things. So remember how we had the automation that we had. Sorry, I'm trying to think through this. For PandaDocs to update contract signed. That does it in Make and says contract signed. I could have continued on with that automation in Make to then say, oh, and create the customer record. You notice that I use that as an out-of-the-box automation with SmartSuite. We did that intentionally because there might be other scenarios where we don't use the out-of-the-box. Sorry, I keep saying out of the box. We don't use that PandaDocs integration to generate the contract. Maybe it's like a really custom agreement that we're doing with somebody, or we just have a different setup. And so we kept a separation of concerns is what I would call it, which is to say that multiple things could make the status contract signed so that it doesn't, you're right, back it up and mess everything up if we have to say, oh, we didn't use PandaDocs, but we still want to get to contract signed to create that project. So we're always trying to think through it end to end of what do we have to separate out to be able to manage that so that things don't overwrite and get out of sync that way.
Fair. We have a question coming in from actually a few people, all along the same lines, and they're asking, have you shared this solution as a template, or do you plan to? And have you ever implemented this or willing to implement this with any of your customers that are service providers?
Oh, yeah. So I haven't really thought about doing it as a template. I guess there'd be some value maybe from like the margin formulas kind of stuff. But honestly, so I think I've probably done like 40 project service implementations, and they all look a little bit different. So I haven't found enough value. Like most of the time when we're working with a client, we're doing kind of these builds from scratch, and there's elements that we might use and we like sub in pieces of it. So if there's value in just like the formula type stuff, I think that makes sense, but it's not really easy to duplicate over and say, hey, take this plus the make stuff plus the whatever else. Yeah, I definitely consider that on just the straight project tracking side. And then yes, from a client standpoint, we implement this stuff so many different times. Of the clients that come to us, I'd say 90% of them need project management functionality or CRM functionality or both, because every business needs to sell stuff and needs to make money somehow. And so it involves those capacities. So yeah, we're doing lots of variations of this. I showed you our variation because this was easy to spin up, but with clients, like we've used other systems for their invoicing, other systems for their document management. It really comes down to just, we understand the business process and just what tools are you using to get that done at the end of the day.
Nice. Maybe you can give us a quick sneak peek. You mentioned you're pulling in automatically the consultant that's assigned to the project with their hourly rate, so you know the margin, and then you're also pulling in from the contract with the client there what you made up with them that you're going to bill them per hour and tracking the margins and overall project. Would you give us a quick sneak peek of those formulas and how they're working? Oh, yeah, for sure. Like I mentioned, first we got to get the source data, and what we're doing for that is honestly just some basic lookups here. I've tended to use formulas because formulas can get some of the same functionalities, lookups done, and then we can aggregate them different ways. So I've opted more for the formula side. And sorry, I keep forgetting. I keep thinking like, oh, you've all been using SmartSuite since forever. I should mention one of the great parts about SmartSuite's formulas is this dot notation, which we can say, hey, we have a linked project and we want to pull from an attribute of that linked project, we want to pull that bill rate, and we can get like multiple steps away and we can aggregate that. And that's one of the things I really love about SmartSuite's formulas. We're doing the same thing on the consultant rate. So that's because we've got the customer record. I'm sorry, not the customer. We've got the assigned consultant record here. It's pulling from the assigned consultant dot bill rate over there. Hourly margin. This is just saying, okay, we'll take the bill rate, subtract that consultant rate, those fields that you have now. So here's the hourly margin.
again, people are manually entering in the billable duration. So now how we get to the total margin, we've got that as like the hourly margin times the billable duration. And then this divided by 3,600 is just because it inputs it in seconds. And so we have to convert that to be able to get to hours for that amount. So that, I hope that kind of helps answer it. Really, the calculations on this end of it are really simple. It's then like the aggregation that we're doing on the looker side and everything else to be able to say, okay, that's one task that rolls up to this project, that rolls up to this customer. Early on, we just had like tasks associated with customers, but then we decided later on, hey, we've got multiple projects for the same customer. We'd rather be able to divide it down and say initial implementation, here's an integration project, and have that extra layer. So for a lot of people, it works to skip this projects app and just have it direct depending on the kind of project that you're doing. But yeah, I would say overall, the base level calculations are pretty, I say simple just from a standpoint of it's basic math, right? You do the math and you get that, and then it's the aggregation that we bubble that up.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to see how simple and easy it is to set up such a calculation app. And this becomes a no-brainer for anyone running such a business, is to like have an app that automatically pulls in what you're billing each client, what your bill rate is, what you're paying each consultant, and kind of your margins, total margins on the project per hour margin. This is amazing. I guess moving on to the next question we have over here. So Richard is asking, I have a need to have a form which has repeating sections, for example, adding line items when the number can vary for each submission. Do you know of a form solution that has this sort of feature?
Yeah, I haven't even preached my love of Fillout on this video, which I like normally do on these webinars. Fillout is a tool that integrates with SmartSuite. And so SmartSuite forms are like good for out of the box, like you want to have a contact form, awesome. But Fillout lets you have those line items. You can do updates of records, not just creating records. Yeah, absolutely. So if imagine this, you have a form and it's like an order form and you have order line items. And for each of those order line items, it looks up a product or it looks up a service and you have a quantity associated with it. And then what that can do is instead of just creating one record back inside of SmartSuite, it creates the order and the order line items. So yeah, Fillout's great. Actually, this is another link I should follow up with. I just created a free course on using Fillout with SmartSuite and Airtable, just because we use it on, I don't know, 70% of projects. It's like a key staple to a lot of the things we're working on.
Yeah, we love Fillout as well. I think Fillout is a phenomenal product. And I personally work with their CEO, Dominic, who's just a phenomenal person. And we're actually looking forward to hosting Dominic on our panel in the upcoming No Code France for those of you who will be there. But yes, Fillout is a phenomenal tool. And so glad that use case. I'll also give a quick shout out to SmartSuite Forms that just recently added logic to the forms, which is a great capability for many customers who are using SmartSuite Forms. Our next question is from Maxime. And the question is there some error handling built in native SmartSuite automations, kind of adding up the first question, but generalizing?
Sorry, adding up the first question, but general?
Yeah, I think that was just a comment at the end of the question. I think the question is, there's sort of error handling built in native to SmartSuite?
I would say overall, not really. So we've got the ability to track a history of automation runs and things that have gone wrong, and you can drill in and be able to use that to have a log of things that have happened. The other thing you can do as a workaround solution is that you could potentially write event data that happens to like an event record that you have in an app. However, that doesn't really handle the errors themselves. So I'd say typically for more complex kind of stuff that do require error handling, that's typically when we're using a tool like Make, because there's probably better built-in error handling for it. Yeah. So Avi, would you agree with that assessment for SmartSuite?
Yeah, no, and I see we're getting clarification. If your automation made attempt on external API and failed. So I guess maybe how are you managing? So if SmartSuite automation made an attempt on an external API and failed, how are you handling?
Yeah, for sure. Typically, we're using Make with the webhooks to do that external stuff. So we could write some data back into SmartSuite, but typically we want to keep SmartSuite clean, and that's about like our business functional data. So I've got some alert mechanisms and emails that notify me as the admin of the stuff that we're getting in the backend, because ultimately, if there's an issue, I probably have to go into Make to deal with that instead of into SmartSuite. SmartSuite's more the like We're just giving you some information and then you do the rest with it. So typically we've got the error handling and notifications directly in Make as opposed to SmartSuite. But there's no reason I think you could use the Make API probably to write data back into SmartSuite as it comes to the automation runs. We just haven't had that need.
Makes sense. And last question we have from Rick, and I have to thank Rick. I don't know who you are. I don't think we've ever met, but Rick has been adding in every product URL you've been mentioning throughout the webinar into the chat. So thank you very much for handling the chat for us. And so the last question from Rick is, what tools do you use to design and document these nifty solutions?
Ooh, yeah, a couple things. You can actually take the metadata of how apps are connected, and there's actually that automatically generates that documentation on a dashboard. It's a widget that you can use on a dashboard. So that's really nice that you don't have to say like export all of the metadata and then pump it into something to make that happen. We do a lot of business process mapping kinds of activities. We use Miro for that to be able to document that out for our clients. There's an advent of some new tools like Operator is starting out. I know they're starting with Airtable and Zapier and things like that, that I really think there's going to be this huge explosion of like how to automatically document some of this stuff, which then is going to take the lift off. Because I think what happens a lot of times is that clients are like, yeah, I don't want to pay for the documentation, whatever. So like we've got documentation that we do, but I think once we get to the state where we can like automatically generate documentation, that's going to be even more valuable just because, hey, run a job on it and have it generate that.
Okay. I'll actually jump in and add two more things. Well, first of all, I see Rick is throwing in here SmartSuite whiteboards rumor. Yes, that is a rumor that's circulating.
Is Rick a former ClickUp user? That would be my question, because that seems.
We'll see about that rumor. I have a good feeling about it. But there is a solution we came across, and we've been talking to the founder. It's called NC Scale, and they actually do provide automatic documentation. They do automatic documentation, alerting. So change, basically, I think the way they describe it is GitHub for no code, where they're managing any change that was made. They can do any alerting. So you can set up like alerts and filters and say, if anyone changed something in the structure of the solution that wasn't me, send an alert to XYZ person, or it changed. So very interesting solution, and we've been talking to them. So I guess I'll put it out there. If there's anyone who is using them, who wants to use them along with SmartSuite, feel free to reach out. We'll connect you with them and we can work on an integration. But they do a lot of the documentation piece as well. So what's mapping to what, especially if you're using external tools.
Yeah, and NC Scale and that Operator I mentioned play in the same space. So I'd say hit them both up to show them your love of SmartSuite and see if we can get something going.
Okay, amazing. Dan, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much for joining and sharing this fantastic automation solution and just all of your insights and knowledge from the industry, and can't wait to host the next one with you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.